Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome back to Adventure Capital, where we not only discuss the entrepreneurial journeys and adventures with founders who have raised capital on Wefunder, but also the different resource providers and mentors helping founders along the way. Huzzah! Today, interestingly enough, we have me, Classic, and one of my partners in crime at Wefunder, Sarah Dvorak, discussing our unique approaches to storytelling. Jonny and Kapow, we're ready.
All right, welcome. We've got Classic and Sarah here on the podcast today, both of whom have recently started at Wefunder. We're super stoked to have them. Let's start with Sarah. Can you tell us what you do at Wefunder and kind of a little bit of your background, what got you involved?
Totally. I come to Wefunder as a recovering food business entrepreneur and storyteller in the cheese and wine space. And I have been drawn to this idea of democratizing capital and raising money from the public for, over a decade. And it's part of how I fundraise for my previous businesses. And so what I come to Wefunder to help other founders do is hone their story and make due diligence easy and fun and help them get all the money that they need to make their dreams come true.
Amazing. Awesome. So switching over to Classic, what brought you to Wefunder and what do you do here?
What brought me to Wefunder was Ryan. Hey, shout out to Ryan. No, I'm a big fan of presenting the presenter. I never thought I was the smartest person in the room, but I love information. I love learning something new. And I feel like I just got in the habit of I would do all this reading and then I would just start talking to people hey man, did you know and I was like, man, what if I started to build sort of a platform around this? Because I like to perform. Did a lot of stage, did a lot of short film work. And this was sort of my excuse to constantly perform while also getting a good message across. And so at Wefunder, I'm kind of doing the same thing because there's so much information, there's so much legacy, there's so much history that hasn't been told yet. And I feel like my approach will not only show folks that this isn't just business as usual, but it can be very entertaining. And then maybe we can even get some secondary audience, which I'm a big fan of, folks that this isn't their day to day. They didn't go to school for this, but they could contribute in some way, shape, or form if they got a little bit of information.
That's awesome. The main thing we wanted to do on this podcast was for a founder that's looking at launching a campaign on Wefunder, basically give them a bunch of ideas and tips and tricks for how to think about creating their campaign page, how to compel investors, and kind of outside of the campaign page as well, how to think about telling their story and getting their story in front of more people. So Sarah, your role on the team is as a quote storyteller. You're helping founders kind of put together their campaign page. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about, what is a storyteller role at Wefunder? What do you spend your days doing? And also, I guess, some things that you've seen and learned from the founders you've interacted with over the last few weeks on, what makes a great campaign page.
Totally. I try to, I see my role as a storyteller working with founders to help them get out of the weeds of the nitty gritty of their business and their industry and try to tell the story to the masses. Cause that's what we're trying to do at Wefunder is get your everyday investor to understand the opportunities that are available for them to invest in. So I find that is a huge part of my role, and also walking them through the general idea of crafting a story. And I'm a firm believer in the science of storytelling and how you elicit, an emotional reaction in someone as they're reading or watching a story, and that gets them to remember more information and share more information and be more curious about more information. So storytelling is a science. It's also, an art a little bit, and conveying that to founders and helping them sort of strike that balance of telling the why they're doing what they're doing and the what they're doing without getting too far in the nitty gritty of the technical aspects or industry specific lingo, and make it understandable for the masses.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two interesting tensions that you're putting your finger on there, right? One is like the emotional appeal and the story and the narrative versus like the numbers and the metrics. And then another one is like telling the story to the masses versus like, kind of targeting people that might be super interested in your industry sector, or, kind of that have a lot more context. So I guess classic on both of those, I feel like those two kind of tensions are really at the heart of a lot of what we're talking about here. But how do you think about striking the right balance on those questions?
A lot of it is like, so you got to have the information first and foremost. So not to say that the numbers aren't important or anything like that, because that is what you're projecting, the product itself and how it benefits the people. And then from there, I like to do a lot of listening to the audience and seeing what people are already engaging with, what stories are already being told. And then to create a differentiator is, I feel like you make a lot of sense with nonsense. I think Geico does it really well. They might do it the best. Where like we have all the information and we know what you're used to, and we're going to give it to you, but one thing about it's going to be off. Like they do a lot of wordplay. They're saying the thing, but they're showing you like a change of context with it. And if you can find a good balance of like that sort of like interesting, something is wrong with this, because people like really strive to understand, and if I don't understand it, it's going to stay in my brain, and at that point you've won. Because they're constantly trying to figure it out, but they keep doubling back and having a good time. And I don't know why I'm having a good time, but they don't realize that they're learning more and more about what they need to know in regards to this product and the people behind the product, just because of that sort of like change in the presentation of it. So I'm constantly looking for a balance with that and encouraging folks to do that as well. Not to say they have to do like anything super out of the box like me, but just finding that common ground of like, is it entertaining and is it informative? Because you can be too entertaining and then they didn't learn anything, so then how can they invest in you? And you can be too informative, but like it doesn't really hold their attention, or I don't know why I should like you more than someone else doing this, and I can't invest in you.
Yeah, that's a great point. One campaign that comes to mind for me is Genius Juice. So wefunder.com/genius. Their video, you should watch it if you haven't already. It's the most wacky, off the wall. You just cannot avoid laughing if you watch that video. And it was brilliant. I shared it with a bunch of people. It was like, this is an amazing video, and that gets you on the campaign page, right? I think one thing that everything needs to be so tailored, right, to the brand and the voice of the company. So probably if you're doing like B2B SaaS, like, cybersecurity company, like it's a little less playful, right? If they were doing kind of CPG coconut juice, so it's consumer facing, a really fun brand, and so the voice of the campaign kind of really plays into that. So I think to your point on like the entertainment factor and the kind of quirkiness factor probably depends on like the nature of the company and that.
Yeah.
Even on that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's still a great point. I mean, we tell people all the time, and this is also how Wefunder's brand likes to communicate, is we deal in a super complicated industry. There's a lot of gray area. These laws are new, and everything from our FAQ to our onboarding with our founders and investors is speaking to them like they're a smart 10-year-old. And I think that is like the common thread through any campaign page, whether you're working on like trading annuities or something super complicated, or selling a CPG product that people are more familiar with. You should still treat investors, both accredited and unaccredited, like they're a smart 10-year-old.
Yeah, I think it's honestly it's a good rule, and it's a tremendous challenge for founders of campaigns to be able to craft a pitch that resonates with people across the spectrum of like that super savvy investor to their 70,000 Instagram followers who just want to like interact with their brand or experience and sort of dip their toe in investing.
Yeah, the best campaigns that I've seen that I think do a great job of striking the balance here, it's like super clear up front. The tagline is super crisp, super punchy, no jargon, immediately clear exactly what they do. And then, the highlights kind of go into a little bit more detail beneath the video on, obviously kind of really kind of attracting investors and wanting them to read on and click to learn more. But also can continue to kind of weave the narrative of the story. And then, when you get down to basically the pitch deck section below, again, like the initial slides in the pitch deck, to your point, Kapow, it's like, okay, a smart 10-year-old can get this in 30 seconds. And then, like, as you go further down the page, there's more information and more details. And if there's sophisticated investors who are looking at writing a large check, they can get more information if they have the appetite to do so. But you've already kind of communicated at a very, very basic level, right up top in simple language to the masses. And that for me is like, the sweet spot.
Totally. Like the headline should be very clear and no jargon, as you said. The video can be like the emotional or just like humanizing piece. It should have like some personality and more of the story. Highlights get into the nitty gritty of numbers and, qualifications and, previous raises, any sort of qualitative information. And then I think the pitch sort of should build off of that and like bust out each of those highlights. But, as you move down the page, you're getting more into the details, but also leaving the really, really nerdy stuff for the attachments or appendix at the bottom for people that really want to dig in. That's like my general super high level, like,
and constantly weaving story like along the way. Even when Jonny was talking about like maybe it's like super different with this company that's like, they're a really serious SaaS company, but there's still no getting away from tugging on those heartstrings, those emotional strings of like there's still something that there's an issue that they're solving that everybody deals with in some way, shape, or form, and they're like, it's a different kind of laugh where you're laughing because this is ridiculous. Like, why isn't there a way to fix this? And the company can kind of play off of that. And so like you are touching on something that they resonate with, whether it be in a playful or a serious manner, but you're telling story in that like, this is the problem. We get it. We have this problem and we're solving it in this manner.
What are the common mistakes that you guys see with telling the story and I guess just the different sections of the campaign page?
I think the most common thing I see is people, just way in the weeds and providing information that just isn't readable for the smart 10-year-old. So just like multiple graphics that tell the same story, or, I think just redundancy also in like sort of, they want to drive the point home. And I get that, but like every image, every paragraph should be providing new information and not running through anything that, they've already touched on, just to make it as succinct and, we're looking for like quick due diligence for that person who wants to just put in $100, $250. And so, making it just clean and clear and jargon free. I mean, those those are really important, especially for the more technical products. And then on the flip side, for the more like brick and mortar or CPG companies, I see a common, they almost lean too much on the heartstrings sometimes and forget the numbers and forget like lay out the opportunity. If I'm Sarah and I want to invest $1,000 in your company, what does it mean to me? Like, how does it play out? And like, what is the opportunity, and give it to me straight. Like, I know I could, potentially lose the money, but what is like the good, better, best situation if I put in my money? And so still laying out the offering or investment opportunity, even for those more emotional.
Yeah.
parts.
And I think I would apply this same principle of like weaving the narrative and the storytelling and kind of avoiding jargon and making everything kind of simple and clear to the metrics and to the charts as well, right? Like you can have a chart that's like font size 6, and like a ton of different dimensions, and there's like a massively high cognitive load for someone that's reading that chart to wrap their head around. Is like, what does this mean? And like the founder is in the weeds and they know, like they've seen this chart like 1,000 times, and so it makes a ton of sense to them. But for an investor that's just looking at it, it's like you kind of lose them in the chart. And so just kind of choosing, is it a bar chart or is it a stack bar chart? And like, how do you build up to that? And how do you kind of keep the cognitive load low and really kind of clearly make the point? Maybe you make that point in 3 charts versus 1 chart, but then also kind of weaving the narrative into the chart, right? So you can show a chart, and if it like, kind of drops in 2020 and then comes back up, any investor's going to look at that and be like, yikes, that looks really scary. But then if you annotate it, I mean, maybe it's obvious, but if you just kind of make it super explicit, you annotate it with a call out, oh, that drop was because, we're selling into restaurants and all the restaurants shut down with COVID. And then it's like, well, here's the annotation of where things are bouncing back as we're kind of coming out of COVID. It's like explaining the numbers and the charts with the narrative kind of overlay, I think, can really help. And you can kind of lead investors through the numbers and the metrics, as well as the kind of overall story and narrative of the company.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the balance of things, and how a big issue, like Sarah was saying, is it kind of leans on one side or the other. And when you think of the concept of narrative, it isn't just like this story that you're constantly like laying out and writing out and showing a visual for, but it's just a process in which you got from your beginning, your middle, and your end. There's always going to be a hero. There's always going to be a dragon slay. There's always going to be like a journey to get there with like your peaks and your valleys. That's your numbers. That's your where we were when we started, where we are now, the people that came on board to help us out, the problem, how we tackled it. Like this it just should be a nice flow to it that I think is kind of missed out on at times, because people are thinking about the meat of it, all the numbers, all the substance, and then they're thinking about story completely separate, and just more so like this is where we're trying to go. But we really need all that middle. Like we really need a good balance of all that middle, and we need you to walk us through it. So by the time we get to the end of like what you're trying to accomplish, it's like I completely get it. I know what you've gone through. I know what you're looking to go through, and I know how I can be a part of this.
Yeah. And speaking to that, I think another tip that most founders could use is to have some sort of timeline somewhere in your pitch of letting people know what you've accomplished to this point, like milestones, where you are now, and like where you're planning to go, and when you imagine getting there.
That's a great point. I'm always craving that, as I'm like, especially if a company is pre-traction, actually, because if they're post-traction, that timeline, it's kind of like his revenue chart. Obviously, it's great if it's timeline as well, especially if it's like a biotech company going through FDA approval, right? They don't have any revenue, so they need to demonstrate to investors. Investors are looking for founders to be super quick, rapidly executing, moving forward, right? And you can really help to illustrate how quick you are, how good you are executing with a timeline like that. That's a great point.
Yeah. And even if you don't have revenue or you're not on the market yet, like you say, like you've still accomplished things along the way. Like you've gathered grants, you've done tests, like that is all part of the story, and really valuable to let people know that you've made progress, even though you're not on the market yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also the point about really knowing your stuff and knowing your story, because there are a couple of different opportunities where you're going to tell it. It's going to be in the investor panel. People are going to ask you those quick questions. Todd, our former founder in residence, likes to say, literally everyone's your investor when you're doing regulation crowdfunding. Like, you should be telling people this on the street. You need to have that story, that elevator pitch down. And people sometimes aren't prepared. Like, they don't practice that. They don't know. So what else do people need to be thinking about? Like, what other forms of content are there that you should think about when you're doing a Wefunder campaign besides just the campaign page that will live on the Wefunder website?
I mean, that's a great question, because the profile on Wefunder is, just a component of the raise, right? So a plan to get the word out is, essential. So whether you're already, you're a CPG company and you already have a presence on social media or on, through an email list, like sending that out, and really shouting it from the rooftops is what I always say. Like, if your link to your Wefunder campaign isn't in your social media profile, it should be there. If it's not apparent, like right when you hit your website, that you can invest in this company, and it should be there. It's really the part of the magic of regulation crowdfunding is being able to spread the word. Like, whether you have contacts at your local media outlets, I mean, getting on NPR would be awesome. Like, you can really get the word out any way you can possibly think of. So I think knowing going into your campaign that is part of it, and having a plan for that outreach is really essential. And I think the more momentum you have, then the more Wefunder can support you, because the momentum just keeps you up in the search on the Wefunder page, and that is really valuable as well. So I always recommend people use every avenue they have available to get the word out, whether that's email, social, or traditional PR, reaching out to anyone that will listen and getting on panels, webinars, all the things. So it really depends on your industry, but using every tool you have to shout it from the rooftops. I don't know if that answers exactly the question, because it is a smattering and it's super dependent on the industry and where you are.
And what about you, Classic? Anything else to add in terms of like additional, collateral materials that founders should be creating, like channels that they should be kind of getting the word out through?
Yeah, I would say definitely all the social channels, video and text, but collaboration is always going to be king more than anything. Like, trying to find those alignments, looking left and right, because everybody is a micro influencer in their own way. So if you can utilize your platform to big up somebody else's platform, then that gives them a reason to run off and share about you. And that's why I would always do like media for everybody, because, they probably are looking for media and probably couldn't get media like this either, or probably wouldn't even think to get it like this. And now they're really happy and now they want to share it. But everybody has that of what they have going on. Like, this benefits somebody. This is why you started the company. This is why you made the product. Who can it benefit right now that you can put a piece around? And whether it's like taking a picture, whether it's doing a virtual event, whether it's doing a video, just shouting them out in the caption and sharing an article that they were associated with. And like, yeah, we're big on this too. This is why we do what we do. Just to give them a reason to like and reshare to their people, because it's like a cosign. Like, this person is speaking for you by sharing that piece of material, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, I love that point. I give this advice to founders a lot as well. It's like, if it's just you trying to promote it, then that's like one person on the marketing team, right? But if you can, and I always talk about leveraging investors, right? So if you have 1,000 investors we've invested in you have $1 million in the campaign, but you're shooting for 5 million. If you can leverage those 1,000 people to be your marketing team for you, by engaging them, giving them content, maybe jumping on the phone with them, whatever the tactics are, that is, you just recruited a marketing team of 1,000 people, which is, if you step back, like a huge part of the value proposition for a founder running a CF campaign is you recruit this army of supporters and champions who can help you business, and you need their help right now on getting the word out about the campaign. So I think that's one way to leverage it. And then I think kind of what you were getting at more is, and there's another great point, is like if there are micro influencers who can promote your campaign on their social media and get their audience to see it. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about how virality happens. And it was an interesting insight that I hadn't heard before, which is they were saying, actually, the way something goes viral is not by like, everyone sharing it with like 1.5 people, but it's like a small number of people sharing it with like a small number of very influential people sharing it with like their massive audiences. And that's how you get something to go viral. So that point around collaborating with people that have voices and audiences and influence is a really, really great one.
Yeah, you can get $1 from 1 million people, or you can get $1 million from one person. The other side, the former, is going to be a lot more powerful because of the amount of awareness, the amount of reach. Even with you and the 1,000 investors, if they only had 100 followers, but they all were sharing it, you just reached 100,000 impressions. And those are the big things that can happen with small numbers if you're like super focused and targeted. On top of, these are probably going to be real numbers coming back. It isn't like window shopping because they are investors. They have already invested, and the people tied to them are investors as well. And, these are just like multiple syndicates kind of growing and building. So it is very important to turn the people that have brought into you, whether it's time, money, just, overall energy, like making them advocates, letting them know that you see them, that you appreciate them, and, constantly talk to them, because then, slowly but surely, they're just going to continue to feel good about telling someone else about you.
What about, we kind of touched on this already, but other mistakes that you've seen founders make on their campaign pages?
Yeah, I was going to say, just back to what Sarah was saying, is too much of leaning on either side and not finding that balance. And something I've learned is that you should be thinking about everything at the point of conception. And I know it's hard because you kind of get like caught up in, what it is you're doing. You're super tunnel vision, you're focused, but that's why it's important to have other people around you. And it doesn't always have to be the super, like, I need a whole bunch of money to buy ads. You can be very strategic about just, who's really good at writing, who's really good at like doing videos and presenting, and then making sure that.
Just to double down on that, so you are like amazing at videos, right? And like you see some like founders trying to like be in hero mode, right? Trying to do everything, and it's like oftentimes they need help, right? If you're like a scientist, and I think both on the storytelling and on the content creation, right? So and this is where obviously Sarah, your role, like working with founders on this, if it's a scientist that's deep in the weed and they're kind of used to speaking in long, like academic kind of words, right? Because they're so deep in what they're doing, sometimes you need help, right? So go and find that help. And it doesn't need to mean someone you pay, right? It can be like, a friend who's like an expert on storytelling, or a friend who's an expert on kind of video creation, or photography or whatever it is, but like getting help from experts who can complement you in areas where you might not have that skill set.
100%.
And there's tons of people around that just want to like do stuff because they're trying to build a resume, and they would love to help. And this is like a prime opportunity to like test some ideas out. It's like testing in a way that you probably wouldn't even have gotten if you'd have paid for a larger agency, because they're very focused on, well, this is what you pay for, this is what you're going to get. It always come back to that alignment, and just finding folks around, whether they're investing, whether they're helping out with the product that can, what you're doing can benefit them and vice versa. And then we can, get like a good return on the back end. Like it's a lot of stuff that I've done that I did not get paid for, but I believed in the people, and I believed that it was going to be a good look on the back end. I can use this piece. Thank you for giving me this, your product, so I can build this thing with it, because now I know I can also leverage this into something else. So there's tons of folks around, and like, you don't have to do it all on your own, and you shouldn't even try to, because you're gonna come up short. There's only but so much you can give 100%, and if you're giving 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, look at all these things that are now coming up short.
Yeah. And I think, part of being a founder is being scrappy and resourceful and finding those people in your network and leveraging them and, collaborating. And I think it's a great point of, engaging your community and helping, asking for help where you need help in terms of storytelling, video, photos, and making sure that the profile is ready to go and like visually appealing, and also float.
Visually appealing is a great point. Like it's so painful to me when I see photos on the explore page, and it's like, why have you chosen that photo? That photo just is such a powerful opportunity to cliche, tell 1,000 words. It's like, that is so important. You can grab someone's attention or you can put them off.
Mm-hmm.
Photo is critical.
For the pitch deck. Like, I see so many pitch decks where the company, it actually has really meaningful traction, and it's super exciting. They're working on a big problem, and the way that they're packaging the information in the deck is just not landing with the investors. It's just ugly. It's hard to look at. And so, to all of your points, like finding somebody in your network whose superpower is visual design, have them make you a pitch deck, or there's plenty of resources like on Fiverr or some of those other websites where you can pay someone who might just be starting out a little bit of money, help them build their resume, and get a really, really nice looking pitch deck to upload to your page.
100%. Another mistake that I'll call out is just kind of perfection or imperfection. So I think investors are kind of looking for reasons to not invest, right? And so every little tiny thing that is off, like if there's a spelling mistake, or the photo has a imperfection, or you click on the Facebook link and it doesn't go to the company's Facebook page, and just having everything be absolute, or like even stuff like what you name the PDF investor pitch deck attachment to the campaign, right? If it's like a long gobbledygook file name versus like Wefunder pitch deck, that is like a tiny, it's like that Daniel Kahneman, like kind of just giving a negative like impression to someone in that snap reaction. So absolutely. And again, this is where you can put it in front of friends and have like 10 people kind of crowdsource feedback on it, before you push it out to the masses. Kapil, what else have you seen in terms of, you've worked with probably hundreds of founders over your time at Wefunder. Are there kind of things that they've done super well, or mistakes that they've made that we haven't covered?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on this a little bit, but I think the tagline is probably one of the most important pieces of real estate. And it should be like sort of what this is very YC style, but people should know in one sentence what your company does. So I'm trying to think of an example, but we definitely have things that, like for a food product, for example, it's like frozen, organic, ready to eat, best tasting ever, organic coconut juice. Like that would be a terrible tagline, but for those, like sometimes for the founder, those adjectives and getting all of those things in their product, like that's hard to do. It's hard to make a really clean product like that. But like on the investor side, like they just want to see like what the product is. It doesn't need to be super, super over the top confusing. It should just be clear. I think the other thing is on the highlights. So sometimes people will put like 10 highlights or 10 reasons to invest, and that's just too many. It looks bad. They're a lot of the times they could be combined. Like people oftentimes are kind of struggling to come up with 10 super compelling reasons and like punchy reasons to invest. So And Sarah, you said this as well, but they should really be quantitative. They should talk about your traction, and you should consolidate them to like the top 5, maybe top 6 reasons to invest, so that people, they get a bite-sized chunk and then they want more. They want the details in the story. They don't want to read the entire thing in the reasons to invest. So
just to double down on that, those bullet points for why invest are so critical and such an amazing opportunity. And they another kind of maybe high level point as well, which is you have to grab people's attention. You have to wow investors with like, with the top 2 bullets that are going to be in the card on the explore page and are going to be featured in emails and kind of in the Facebook post copy, right? And so in those highlight bullet points, what are the things you have that make people go, wow, I want to read more? And so often you see these highlights or various other aspects of the campaign, and it's like, okay, that's kind of nice, but it's certainly not knocking my socks off.
Yeah.
And they're also trying to stuff so much in all these different places. Like, I got to get all this information here. I got to get everything into the tagline, everything into the highlights, everything in the first paragraph. And that's where you're kind of missing out on the balance of it, of like, over time, just drop each area can have its own focus. But super simple, important things first and foremost. And that kind of goes back to people just like not really understanding their pitch as much as well. Like, you should know what like those go-to things are. Like, it kind of looks to me like you're still figuring it out yourself, and like, let me just make sure you get everything at one time. Yeah, that less is more, and because you have time to break it down over the course of this, this page. Sorry about the dirt bikes. It's Philly.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, we ask everybody this question who comes on the podcast. What, as founders yourselves as well, this is super relevant. What advice would you give to someone thinking about starting a regulation crowdfunding campaign? Some light chatter to end
some light chatter. I mean, I think when you're, as a founder in general, like, you should always be asking yourself, like, why does humanity need what I'm about to offer, what I'm putting out? Like, how does it impact the world in a good way? And sort of letting that guide you and your story, and conveying that to people in terms of like what problem you're solving or what delicious thing you're going to offer them and how it's going to make the world a better place, I think, ties into the whole regulation crowdfunding mission. And thinking about who specifically the people that you're trying to reach, and like really making sure you're speaking to them, and have a plan as to how to reach them. Like, whether that is even like handing out postcards at, the farmer's market with your CPG product, or different avenues of outreach. I think those are the main things I would say. It's like be connected with the why, like truly, and then also a method for casting the net wide, because that is part of regulation crowdfunding, is like the ability to spread it far and wide. And you're not just going to give a very, a pitch on Sand Hill Road. Like, you're speaking to the world. And so being prepared to spread that gospel.
I would say don't forget about the community that got you there. Like, I'm really big on community building, and like how we were saying earlier, like those are your early ambassadors, those folks that were there since the beginning, those folks that came over time, and now you have to spread this message. So why not start with them? Like I remember working with somebody, and he would always say, man, how do we make this pop? His brand, like, how do we make it pop? How do we get it in magazines? How do we go bigger, man? We need more people to see this. I'd be like, dude, man, you have like over 1,000 emails in this book, because they would come in and they would write it in the book. It's 1,000 emails here, and you've never talked to these people. Like, that's how you make it pop right there, because we don't know who's who, what they do, how much they love you, and they could be running off with this message. And again, like that whole pod, like, just spreading it so wide and reaching all these numbers organically that you didn't have to pay for. They actually paid you to market you. All you had to do was just say, hey, thank you, I love you. Keep on coming in, and I'll keep on serving you. Because I feel like crowdfunding is the people investing into your vision, so that way you can scale and serve them better and serve others, but first and foremost them, because they got you there.
100%. I see so many founders when they're running a Wefunder campaign, and it's like, how do I do like Facebook ads and the mass marketing approach? And it's like, if you can't get the people that are your close friends, family, your community, your customers to invest in you, then how on earth are you going to persuade like strangers and people that and like, I don't know, maybe you can, but that's probably going to be a really, really expensive and inefficient like approach to raising capital. So yeah, start with the people that got you there. And also those people are probably going to be more likely to the point earlier of like helping you to, give feedback on your campaign, or helping you, make the video, or connect you to someone that can do the photography or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a really great note to end on. Well, thanks so much, Sarah Classic, for joining me and Katie on this call. It's been a really interesting conversation, and some great advice in here for founders. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah,
thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, thank you
I
guys.
like talking.
All right, cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Adventure Capital. I hope you laughed, took notes, shed a tear, and most importantly, feel ready to go off on your own adventure. And remember, whenever you are ready, Wefunder is here to help.